Good day everyone, it's Sailor MB here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my ranged Magicka Templar build, the LagPlar. This is the first time I'm ever redoing or updating an old build video, so that should be an indication of how much Magicka Templar has changed over the past few patches, specifically since the implementation of the representative systems, and how excited I am to share this new build with you guys. To start off, just going to cover a bit of the rationale behind this build, specifically addressing the obvious, why it's called the LagPlar. Coming from Australia, I have a solid latency of 300. I am very lucky if it drops to 275 for brief periods of time. As such, that drastically changes how you have to play the game in order to preempt things that are happening on your screen. So this build deals with higher than average latency in three ways. Firstly, by having super effective, bursty, ranged offense. This means you can blow opponents up before they even reach you. Secondly, is having two layered snares to place on your opponents to physically slow down the pace of the fight. This means you won't be getting hit with Dawnbreakers or dizzying swings from 10 meters away. And thirdly, having super effective defense. This means you can still get bit in the ass by lag, you can still get hit by something even though you were blocking, and you will be able to recover because of your tanking abilities. In addition to combating high latency, this build also deals with one of the nuances of playing Magicka Templar, and that is a very defined offensive and defensive combat stages. We don't have the greatest or the most consistent offensive heal over times. As such, we're constantly yo-yoing back and forth between dealing damage and healing damage that's been done to us. Now, most builds will try and compensate for this by lifting your mitigation of your offense bar, but on the trade-off of spell damage or spell crit. This build does not trade off. It embraces our offensive and defensive style of gameplay. Now, we do this by having Master's Inferno staff on your front bar and Mark of the Pariah only active on your back bar. This gives you room for a complete offensive 5-piece and a monster set. And we are wearing 5-piece light armor with this build. So how that works with Pariah is 1 heavy chest piece, 2 jewelry pieces, sword and board. Pariah is one of the very few sets where the jewelry drops in all traits, so we don't lose out on any max magicka for that because the Pariah will drop in arcane. Speaking of max magicka, our offensive 5-piece set is Brightthroat's Boast. Previously, this used to be Juliana's for me, but in the introduction of this set, all it takes is a Mundus change, and you have almost the same stats, except you have way more match magicka with Brightthroat's Boast, and that definitely helps when you're playing solo on a Magicka, because you do need to mistform quite a lot, and having that larger magicka pool really helps with being able to do that and maneuver around and make sure you constantly stay in control of the fight. Our 2-piece set is Valkynscoria, and this is a good segue into what skills we're using and how this build sets up its range burst. And as you can tell from Valkynscoria, we've also got some damage over times in there. So let's dive straight into our offensive skills and see how that all stacks up. First up, we have Elemental Drain. This will provide you with a significant damage boost through the reduction of your opponent's spell resistance. It also applies minor magicka steal, which means you can just really unload when you're on your offensive bar and not have to worry about your sustain at all. The regen levels on this build though are set to be able to sustain without Elemental Drain, so it just gives you that little bit of boost when you're on your offensive bar. But when you switch to defense and you're not getting any benefit from Elemental Drain, you'll still be able to sustain just fine. Second skill along is Purifying Light. Now this really is the crux of any Magicka Templar build. It provides you with your most burst. So you throw this skill on and any damage in the next 6 seconds will be copied and then applied as a burst. So this is how you really catch opponents off guard. It also has a nice heal over time if you can get in the tiny range of it, and it won't be up 100% of the time as your rotation is going to get interrupted. So if you can use that heal over time, it's great, but you can't rely on it as an offensive heal over time. Third skill along is Reflective Light. This is one of the 2 snares you're going to be putting on your opponents, so you can really help control the fight. It's also your source of major prophecy, and it's a great damage over time that's going to be feeding into your Purifying Light proc. On top of all of that, it's also an AoE, so it's just going to keep that damage ticking over on people who aren't your primary target and force them to back off and heal every so often, which really helps ease the pressure in those 1vx situations. Next skill along is Flame Reach, and this obviously has the synergy with your Master's Inferno Staff, which turns this skill into pseudo-spammable. So it's a great damage over time, it's a great CC with a knockback to help keep opponents away from you, and the Master's Inferno Staff decreases the cost and increases the damage of it. You'll notice in a lot of the background videos, I fired 2 of these off at once. If it was a normal CC, that would not be worth the damage, but combined with the Master's Inferno Staff, it definitely is. On top of that, when you're versing good players, they will often see the Flame Reach come in and block, because it is obviously a very obvious animation. What they won't see is the second Flame Reach immediately behind it, because in any build without a Master's Inferno Staff, doing 2 in a row would be completely pointless. But in this build, it gives you that extra direct damage boost, and it guarantees that CC by doing 2 in a row. And then we have our Execute, Radiant Oppression. This skill was gutted a while ago, but the last 1 or 2 patches it's seen some rebalancing, and it's actually in a really good place right now. So it's got a reduced cost, which means it's no longer prohibitively expensive, the damage is decent, and it's had its duration shortened, which means you can still light attack weave and not lose the damage you get from that, either from enchants, or just the damage from the light attacks, or the proc and increased spell damage enchant. You'll see in some of my clips that I'm still not used to the reduced duration, and I still try to do the old 360 look around me while I'm RDing to make sure that I'm not getting ganked, and it cuts off and I freak out, but that's just a change we have to get used to. But it is ultimately a good change. Finally, we have our ultimate, Shooting Star. This really is the only consistently viable ultimate that we can have on this build. It's ranged, it's AoE, so you can 1vx with it, and it's got that stun to help you give yourself an extra second of free damage. On top of that, it also drops down an AoE, so that will tick at least once before people can get out of it, and if it's inside your ritual and you have reflective light on them, they're going to be even slower and hopefully take an extra tick or 2 from that AoE. You can use Ice Comet for the increased damage, but because this is flame damage, vampires are going to be taking extra damage from it anyway, so you'll probably find that the damage between the 2 averages out between vampires and non-vamps, and this one gives you the 12 ultimate back, which just makes it absolutely amazing. And now on to our defensive bar. First up, we have Degeneration. This skill just gives you so many passives. It's like the ultimate buff skill. Most importantly, it gives you Major Sorcery for your 20% spell damage increase, and second most importantly for this build in particular, it's also a damage over time, so it will help proc Scoria. In addition to that, it gives your light and heavy attacks a chance to heal you. It in itself is a heal over time. Through the Mage's Guild passive, it gives you Empower, 2% Max Magicka, and 2% Magicka Recovery. So this skill just gives you a little bit of everything, it's great. Second skill along is Honor the Dead. This is our burst spammable heal. So this is what keeps us alive when you've got 3, 4, 5 people hitting on you. It won't keep you alive through everything though, so you do have to line of sight, you do still have to use your maneuverability, and you do still have to bar swap and get some of your damage over times out, or get some CCs out to help relieve that pressure as well. But Honor the Dead is going to keep you alive through a lot. You can use Breath of Life, especially if you're on CP Cyrodiil. It's probably the better option to help out your teammates a little bit. But for no CP, you definitely need the cost reduction that is built into Honor the Dead when you heal someone below 75% health. Next up, we have Extended Ritual. I can't really over-exaggerate how much I've been crutching on this skill the last 1 to 2 patches with the Bleed Slodes meta. It's absolutely amazing for getting rid of damage over times, in top of getting rid of snares, immobilizations, and debuffs applied to you. It doesn't scale the more people you're versing though, so even though it's super effective 1v1, 1v2, as soon as you're trying to tank multiple people, you will still always have debuffs on you, no matter how much you use this skill. It's also our second snare that we're using on our opponents. It's not going to stick with people like Reflective Light does, but it's great to kite around. So you drop this in amongst a rock formation, you drop Reflective Light on your opponents, you use Mistform for Major Expedition, and suddenly you're moving so much faster than them. You can get that line of sight, you can get that heal off, you can split the opponents up so you can take them one at a time. It's absolutely an amazing skill. Ritual of Retribution is also a viable morph instead of this skill. It's not going to be cleansing as many negative effects for you, so it's going to work even worse in outnumbered situations, but having that damage makes it a lot easier to turn around from your defensive stage to your offensive stage. It will help you proc Scoria, forcing them to bar swap and take a few global second cooldowns out to heal themselves. So Ritual of Retribution if you find yourself in 1v1, 1v2s, Extended Ritual if you often find yourself fighting or trying to tank more opponents than that. Fourth skill along is Channeled Focus. This is where we get our major resistance buffs from, additional resistances when we're standing inside the rune, and also additional Magicka return that is still active when you're in Mistform. So this helps your sustain tremendously. As you can see in the background videos, I Mistform quite a lot, and this is what sustains me while I'm doing that and my regen is not activated. The other morph for this skill is also entirely viable, especially if you're in CP campaign and you have alternate source of Magicka recovery. It would make your stamina management go through the roof and enable you to tank and stand your ground a lot longer than you see me doing in this video. That's also complemented by the extra max stamina you get just by being in the CP campaign also. So both morphs for this one is viable, although for a DPS in no CP, I would definitely recommend Channeled Focus. Fifth skill along is Elusive Mist. As a Magicka Templar, this is really your only maneuverability option. You have Extended Ritual to help cleanse snares and immobilizations off you, but if you're versing quite a number of people, it's often not enough, and you have to pop that mist to be able to reposition and line of sight and keep control of the fight. So as I said previously, combining the use of this with snares on your opponents and using Channeled Focus yourself to make sure you still get Magicka while in Mistform, this is a great tool for repositioning and to be able to control the environment. And finally, our defensive bar ultimate, Remembrance. Not only is this a great group skill if you happen to come across some few pugs that you need your rescuing, it's also great for solo. You do have to be careful of your positioning though. I usually pop a Mistform before using Remembrance to get that little bit of extra line of sight and to drop down a Channeled Focus to make sure you got that extra resistances while you're channeling and to make sure you've got your Magicka recovery while you're channeling. So to bring all that information together, the typical rotation for this build is pre-buffing with Channeled Focus. Then, if you're anticipating staying within a small radius, drop an Extended Ritual, or if you think you're going to have to chase someone, then don't bother spending the Magicka on it. Degeneration on them to get that first damage over time to get your major sorcery buff. Bar swap, if you're 1v1, you should definitely have time for Elemental Drain next. But if you're versing multiple opponents, sometimes you just have to skip it, depending on the situation. Next, Purifying Light. 1v2, put it on both people. 1v3, get it on as many as you can before you're under too much pressure. Next, Reflective Light. This will start the damage that Purifying Light is going to copy. It's also helpful to get it on as many people as possible, made easier if they're grouped together, obviously, and it will do it itself, just to keep that pressure on all the people who may not be your primary target. Next is Flame Reach, followed by your Execute, Radiant Oppression. If you wanted to work a meteor in there, proc your meteor first, then do your flame reach to make sure they're CC'd before the meteor hits, so they take the full brunt of that damage. You can also do, as mentioned previously, 2 flame reaches in a row to make sure that one of those CC hits. Now on to a few of the more minor aspects of the build. We are using Witchmother's Potent Brew in order to proc the 5th piece of Brightthroat's Boast. We're using Tri-Stats Enchants on all our armor pieces. I would be using it on the Jury as well if I had Jury crafted. We're using 4-piece Impen and 4-piece Sturdy. That just gives a good balance between regular damage reduction and block cost reduction, which allows us to negate more damage through blocking. And we're typically using Tri-Stat pots, but we also have some immovable pots in there as well. Now how we can use the immovable pots is to guarantee that we get our full rotation out on someone who is particularly hard to kill. It can also be used to negate someone's CC on you preemptively. It's usually pretty obvious. Probably the most obvious example would be a Stamina Warden when they come in with the Subterranean Assault Heavy Attack Dawnbreaker. You can pretty much always tell when someone's going to CC you. So you can preemptively use that so your rotation doesn't get interrupted and you can get a full one out on them and outburst their damage. The last thing I wanted to mention was the limitations of this build. Unfortunately, because we rely so heavily on projectiles, Magicka Dragon Knight's Flappy Wings is a pretty solid counter to us. In saying that though, we have it a lot better than Magicka Nightblades or Stamina Nightblades who just use a bow. In their instances, all their attacks are projectiles, but most of them are direct damage. So if they get reflected, then that's the burst for that rotation done. With us, we just have to sneak a single flame reach in, followed by a single reflective light before they can refresh the wings, and that's basically a full rotation of damage done. That will get copied by Purifying Light, and then we can execute with Radiant Destruction without getting executed. So it is tough to verse Magicka Dragon Knights or very good Stamina Dragon Knights, but it is totally possible to do it. Unfortunately, this is just the scissors to paper for this build. And that wraps up the build video, guys. Remember that this is just a template. Change this to suit your situation better. For no CP, high latency, range Magicka Templar, I can without a doubt say this is the best build out there. But your situation, your access to gear, your access to jewelry crafting, your playstyle and your group composition might mean that it's best to make changes for you, and please do that. Use this as a template and create an even better build than I've got here. Have a good one out there, guys. Can't wait to see all your Magicka Templars.